of typical characteristics of environmental projects need to be recognised when we're trying to evaluate or prioritise or assess the value for money from environmental projects. So typical characteristics include that they have high upfront costs and delayed benefits, that they have only partial success, that they deliver a range of different types of benefits, that they can have risks of project failure, that there'll be only incomplete practice adoption by farmers, that they won't do everything we'd like them to do necessarily, and that they have requirements, that the projects have requirements for ongoing funding. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those issues, starting with high upfront costs and delayed benefits. This is a graph that we've seen previously in a previous week that we used to illustrate how projects typically have delayed benefits or benefits that are larger in future years and costs that are larger in the short term, in the current time frame. This was an example that we showed that was focused on an environmental or resource project by farmers, but the same sort of issue arises to the same degree, perhaps even more, when we're dealing with projects that are focused more on public benefits, so benefits of biodiversity conservation and so on. I know that in my own work, looking at trying to evaluate these types of projects, some projects that I've looked at have had time lags to benefits of 50, 60, even 100 years, particularly in things like groundwater changes, salinity management. And if you're looking at climate change, long term, we really are talking about long time frames. So that means that it's very important to use discounting appropriately so that we compare current costs with future benefits. And it's actually a little bit of a controversial issue in climate change, where we're talking very long time frames, 100 years or more. There's quite a debate and further discussion about how discounting should best be used. But for shorter time frames, projects up 20, 25, 30 years, then that sort of debate is not so strong, and it's pretty clear that the traditional sort of discounting approach is sufficient. Okay, next I'll talk about the fact that environmental and natural resource projects are often only partially successful. They never repair the environment, almost never, to be fully pristine, or if they do, they can be incredibly expensive. But that doesn't mean that they're not beneficial. A project can be really worthwhile, even if all it does is maintain an environmental asset at its current condition, rather than allowing it to degrade further. Or even just reducing the rate of reduction, the rate of degradation. We saw that in an earlier week, where we saw the comparison of the with and without project case. So the with project doesn't necessarily have to involve an absolute improvement in environmental conditions for there to be benefits. But we do need to estimate what degree of environmental protection or improvement is realistic for a particular project. That's obviously a crucial part of the evaluation. Next, there's a range of different benefit types. Environmental projects can generate multiple different types of benefits. So financial benefits to farmers, such as arising from shelter for livestock. Environmental benefits for the broader community through provision of habitat for local biodiversity. Social benefits to participants, people who participate in the project itself, through building trust and networks in the community. And we need to decide, if we're doing an evaluation, which of these types of benefits we're going to include, which are we going to consider in our evaluation. Next, there's a risk of failure. Not all environmental projects succeed, so we'll need to factor in the fact that there could be technical risks. We might do a project, but it just might not work for technical reasons. Social risks, there might be social resistance to us even implementing the project, even if we've got funding and so on to go ahead with it. Financial risks, we might have funding for the start of the project, but not to maintain and continue the benefits off into future decades. Or managerial risks. It may be that the organisation that is responsible for implementing the project lacks competence or expertise in the particular area. They're all reasons why we might have a project, continue to go ahead with it, but still not get the environmental benefits that we're hoping for. So different projects vary in the types of risks they face and in the severity of risks that they face. So it's important to consider that and to weigh up the riskiness of projects when we're trying to prioritise which projects to fund. The next one is incomplete practice adoption. So farmers who are trying to promote behaviour change or changes in farm management, even if they cooperate or comply or participate in the project, they may only do so to a moderate extent. So this is particularly a problem, obviously, for those environmental projects that rely on farmers changing their behaviour. Not all projects do rely on that, but most environmental projects obviously do. Typically, not every farmer will cooperate and adopt the desired changes. So environmental projects vary in how attractive they are to farmers for various reasons. Some might, even two projects that generate the same environmental benefits, might be very different in terms of their costliness or the degree of financial benefits that they generate for farmers. So they're going to differ in how attractive they are. So we need to consider this when prioritising our projects, if we want to choose those projects that are most likely to deliver the best environmental benefits. And finally, there's the issue of ongoing funding requirements. Many environmental projects require long-term funding, not just the establishment funds to get the project going. So for example, we might need to be able to repair or maintain works that we've put in place for a long time if they're going to keep delivering their environmental benefits. Or if a project relies on education and training, we might need to keep those education and training processes going to inform new farmers as they come along, or to remind existing farmers of the issues that they've learned about but they may lose sight of. So these costs of keeping the benefits going are just as relevant as any of the other costs when we're prioritising the project. And the possibility that we might not get them is important as well. It's often the case that environmental projects have plenty of funds to get started, but then find it very difficult to maintain the benefits in the long term. And so that risk of not getting the long-term funding is an important consideration as well. So, in summary, we've talked about some key characteristics of environmental projects that influence value for money, and they include the high upfront costs and delayed benefits, the fact that projects can be only partially successful, the range of different benefit types that can be delivered, the risk of project failure, the probability that there's going to be only incomplete practice adoption by farmers, and the requirement for ongoing funding, which we may or may not get, and which, if we do get, we need to factor it into our costs.